Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Jesse Trujillo, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And we want to talk about the amazing things you're doing with AJX Homes, AJX Capital, and then Kids That Flip. I love this television program that's coming out, and we get an opportunity to kind of preview it on here and let our listeners know about it ahead of time. So thanks again for being here, bud.
Oh, thank you, Mike, for having me on. I appreciate it.
I admire you greatly, and I'm super excited for our time together. So where were you born?
Born and raised in San Diego, California.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. So what was your favorite thing about growing up here?
You know, I think sometimes growing up in San Diego, we forget how great our weather is.
Yeah.
I think that's something that until you go somewhere else or start visiting or traveling, that you're like, oh man, we don't have it that bad actually. So I think that's without knowing, I think growing up and to know you can play almost every day without having too much rain and everything. I mean, I think that's always been a win.
That's awesome. So growing up, tell us your story about how you grew up, where in San Diego you grew up, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So there's a town called Chula Vista,
Yep.
Vista, California. It's a city, down a little bit farther south.
Mhm.
You know, born and raised with my dad working two jobs, same thing. I remember, I tell the story about me. I remember being on the line with my mom getting government cheese. Like I vividly can remember it. So, my dad worked hard. But my dad he worked his way up, and he worked his way up to a numerical engineer with General Dynamics here in San Diego.
Yeah.
Did very well, probably making more money than most. But what was crazy to see as I was growing up is that we were always broke. We were paycheck to paycheck, and I love my dad, but he didn't know how to handle money,
Yeah.
and I could see it, right? I kind of despised it, right? It bothered me to see. I would see IRS letters coming to our house, certified all the time, and I think I told myself that's not for me. I don't want that. I remember the stress that it would put on my dad, the stress that it would put on my mom, and it's just again, rich dad, poor dad, right? Kind of situation. And again, love my dad to death. He taught me a valuable lesson of what not to do, and I kind of told myself I would not put myself in that position growing
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
So if you had one thing that was the most important thing you learned growing up, what would that be?
The importance of investing, right?
Yeah.
Investing on making money on your money, not just spending it, because once you spend it, it's gone.
Making your money work for you.
Exactly. We ended up buying a house until I was in high school, and the only reason we bought it is because my mom pretty much forced my dad to get it, and it was the best decision they could have ever made because the market had gone up and they made some equity, and even then the IRS took our equity after that. But I mean, at least the bills were gone, if you want to say so. It's seeing the power of real estate. That's, to be honest, the moment I saw the power of owning your own home, of investing in real estate. The values go up. We worked on it. I remember me and my sister working on the house ourselves, and we ended up raising the value without knowing, right? So it was a powerful learning lesson for me to know, to get in. And I don't know if you know my story. I went to UCSD, and my goal was to be a doctor, and I was pre-med, undergraduate, and my goal was to be a doctor. And I still wanted to do real estate on the side. So I think that was the power that I understood. You can still follow your dreams, follow your goals of anything you want to do, but the power of having real estate, passive income, having that in the background is so important. And I think growing up with that, what ended up happening, I ended up leaving UCSD because I ended up starting doing more real estate, and I loved it. It wasn't a job, it was a hobby.
Yeah.
And I just loved it. So I did end up leaving UCSD. I had worked my way up at a perinatal research laboratory. I worked as a assistant, and then I worked my way up all the way to the head surgeon for this
Oh,
perinatal research laboratory, where I was actually teaching doctors procedures. So it's kind of crazy story, but then I ended up leaving it because a couple of these doctors, the guys I looked up to, they went up to me in different ways and told me, "Man, I wish I could do what you're doing," because I was already doing a couple, real estate purchases by then. And
right.
I looked at them like they were crazy. I was like, "What do you mean? I want to do what you're doing." And he's like, "Man, if I could change things around, dealing with the bureaucracies, the insurance, knowing that you can't actually help people when you know you can." He said it's not the same, right? It's still, you're still helping people, but it's not the same. And I
Yeah.
took it to heart, and I made a decision. I said, you know what? I'm going all in into real estate.
Good for
And it was
you.
around 2006, and I went all in. I left it, and I, started flipping some houses. And then what happened? The market turned on us, right? It
Yeah.
was the big crash. I
Mm.
lost everything, and then ended up living in my father-in-law's garage with my wife and my newborn daughter.
Mm.
And had to make a decision to go back to school and finish being a doctor, or go back to real estate. My wife, told my wife, and she looked at me and she says, "Do what you love." And I said, "Oh man, I love real estate." So I went back for it,
Yeah.
tried, a couple times. In 2009, I found one flip that was going to make us 60. It was the hardest thing to get anyone to invest with us and trust us,
Mhm.
right? Because we had lost everything. Finally found some people. Got it, made 60 grand, and used that 60 grand. And in 2010, I did 20 flips by myself, and
Wow.
since then we've just been growing and growing and growing.
That's
And
awesome, dude.
got to the point we've done about 1,000 flips now, and sold properties with a market value over 500 million. And it's been a wild ride
Mhm.
on that side. The other thing I just, obviously wanted to share was, what most people don't know is that was one time, right? I mean,
Mhm.
that's when you lose all your money and you're broke and you start over. I mean, there's no way but going up. And you think sometimes when you're growing up, you think, oh, nothing, not now, nothing can stop you.
Yeah.
And in 2012, got a knock on my door, and ended up being a police officer. And I saw his badge through the people, and I opened the door and I said, "Hey, officer." And I thought there was something going across the way, a park across our house at that time. And he actually said, "Jesse Trujillo." And I was like, "Oh, he's here for me." And I was very surprised to hear his name come out of his mouth. And I ended up finding out they ended up arresting me. They took me to jail. It was a sealed indictment, and
Oh
so
my
they couldn't
goodness.
tell me for what reason. I hadn't, my kids were in preschool. My wife was gone. Took me in. They wouldn't give me any reason why. Obviously, I thought it must be something due to real estate. I couldn't think of anything else. And sure enough, I find out that two houses that we had sold back in 2008, 2009, this a lender had bought it and said he was going to be buying it with for his clients and being a property manager. I was excited that he was buying from us, because I thought, oh, that's great. I wasn't even making any profit. I just wanted to get him off the books, and
Right.
it was just a perfect win-win scenario. Little did I know that him and his partner were using stolen identities to buy properties in 3 counties, and they were buying these things, renting them, and keeping the rents and not paying the mortgages.
Oh,
So the reason I got involved was because when he came to me and he says, "Hey, before we close, we want to get these things rented for their clients. Hey, would you mind helping us rent them?" And I'm a go-getter. I'm just, sure. I'm appreciative that they're buying it. Yeah, no problem. I put ads out, got renters, put them in there, put all the contracts in their name. Didn't collect any of the rents. But what happened was, when the DA finally went to their houses after everything had happened, when the mortgages had foreclosed, they asked, "Well, who rented these to you?" They said, "Jesse Trujillo." So they figured I was involved in this. So I got stuck in the mix.
wow.
I was in this case. We were dealing with it. The first person I called was a you could say a friend. A friend from grade school that had grown up. He had done very well for himself, graduated top of his class in university, became a lawyer, and doing very well here in San Diego. Called him because couldn't think of anyone else.
Yeah.
And he came out and he finally told us that was the situation. And I said, "Man, who should I get? Who should I?" And he says, "Man, I got you. No worries. I could take care of this." And I thought, okay, well, who better to represent me than a friend? He said, "You don't worry about it, man. We're going to prove your innocence. You're going to be out. You just keep working." I said, "Okay." So even though in the back of your head, trust me, living with that behind you is not an easy thing to do.
I
But
can
we
only
kept going, right?
imagine.
We kept going in the business. Again, that was 2012. And in November of 2013, on Thanksgiving Day, he calls me. He says, "Jesse, I need you to come to my office." And I said, "Hey, man, it's Thanksgiving." He says, "I need you to come now. There's a big change." I was like, "Oh, shoot." Go into his office. I'm sitting in there. It's beautiful view of San Diego, big chair. And I'm sitting there, and I could see his face different. And I said, "What's going on?" and he says, "Hey, they want to involve your partners and in my cousins, which were on the property when we bought those properties. We had bought them together, and said they want to involve them." And I said, "No, there's no way. Like that, I can't let that happen. I just gone through years of dealing with that, and I'm not okay with that." And he says, "Don't worry. If you just sign this plea, I can make sure that they don't include your family, and two, we could still prove your innocence." As crazy as that sounds, as naive as that sounds, I believed him, and I went ahead and signed it.
Hmm.
And when we went ahead and signed it, just still thinking that he's going to get me off, I thought, and I even thought, oh, maybe a slap on the wrist or something, right? Just at that point, I was very. It was important for me not to have my family go through what I was already going through of
Right.
mentally and everything. And April of 2014 rolls around, and we get there, and he's telling, I had a bunch of family, maybe like 15 of us. I had by this time, to be honest, I never even told my mom what was going on. She's like my cheerleader in life, and I
Mhm.
hadn't told her anything what was going on because we figured out no need to even worry her. My dad knew a little bit, but not too much. We took the kids to daycare in that morning. We were talking, the whole family. We were talking about where we're going to go to lunch after we were finally happy that it was going to be over
Mhm.
after everything. Yeah, that's what the attorney had us believing. And we get in there, and I we're there, and the judge is looking at me, and he just keeps staring at me, and he looks up and he looks down at the paperwork, looks up, looks down at the paperwork, and he's nodding his head. And we were looking, and all of us started looking at each other like, "Ooh, what's going on?" And
Mhm.
he just goes, um, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to take this plea?" And I looked at my attorney, and he nodded at me, and I said, "Yes, Your Honor." And then he just shook and says, "Well, you signed it. Bailiff, take him away for 5 years." And it was a complete shock. None of us knew. You could hear the gasp in there.
Oh my
I
goodness.
I looked at my attorney. He looked at me with a blank face, and I said, like, "What just happened?" I mean, I hadn't I hadn't organized my business. I hadn't done anything to prepare. I hadn't even said goodbye to my dad, goodbye to my mom. I hadn't said goodbye to my kids. I didn't know they literally put me in handcuffs at that moment. I just looked at my wife and waved goodbye, and that was it. And they literally took me away, and we had no clue what just happened. Um, so kind of fast forward a little bit, we were in shock. What you don't know is that this friend of mine, he had already convinced me to change my company into his name because he said that was a safe thing to do. He had convinced me to move all our funds into his account because he said that was a safe thing to do. He had convinced me to do many things that I looked back and I said, "Oh no, something went completely
Mm.
off the rails here, and I just got duped again." And sure enough, we started looking into it more. We got another attorney because he came out of there crying to my family and letting them all know, "I don't know what just happened. We'll fight this." He never looked for me after that. And so we got another attorney. We did get our company back in our name. We got some of our money, but very few. I ended up finding out he charged me quadruple what a typical attorney would charge me. Months into, they took me into state prison because the losses were over $500,000 to the banks. They automatically sent me to prison, not even county jail.
Mm.
And while I was in there, we ended up, trying to find out what's going on. I get a letter from my wife, and it says they took him to jail. And I was like, he's on the news. And it ended up being that attorney of mine, that friend that I had, he ended up getting arrested a couple months later because he was money laundering for the Mexican mafia millions and millions of dollars across the country.
Oh
And
my
it was
goodness.
all during the time when he was supposedly working on my case. So he never turned anything. He never worked on my case. He never cared about was going on with me. So now he's arrested. He's in jail in federal prison. He never had, it's called ineffective assistance of counsel.
Yeah.
Even though that happened, and you would think, oh, that's a slam dunk, I can go back and fight it. The way the judicial system is, sadly, I was an uphill battle. Nobody wanted to take my case. It was too hard to prove. It was going to take too long. The costs of it were going to be crazy. And as I'm in there, this is happening, and then all of a sudden I get a book from my sister. It's a Lou Garrett. It was a little book on Lou Garrett, if you're familiar with him,
Mhm.
a famous baseball player. And it was a kid's book, and I was like, oh, my sister sent this by accident. She must have not understood. And then she comes to visit me, and by then I'm already in again over like 6 months in prison. And she gets to me. I'm in Northern California, about 7 hours away from San Diego. She
Mhm.
gets her. She's my first visitor that I get to see, and she walks in and she's just crying, crying and crying and crying. And she sits down. And I said, "What's wrong?" And she says, "It's mom. She has Lou Gehrig's disease. I didn't know how to tell you. It's taking her fast, and she probably only has months to live." And it was at that moment when I made a decision. You know, I talk about I was determined, right? I determined I had to see my mom. My mom couldn't go up there to where I was. They had this program where you could become actually a firefighter through through the judicial system. They have different camps, and they had 2 of them in San Diego. And I said, if I can get there, they can take her there, and at least I can see her, for a last time. And it was a hard battle. As much as I know I look like a firefighter model over here, it was hard work. I was working out all day, as any time I can get. I was working out. I had to pass a test to get on to become a firefighter.
Yeah, it's a physical test. Yeah.
Oh, it's vigorous. I mean, I was running 5 miles a day. And nothing could stop me because I needed to see my mom.
Yeah.
And I worked out, and I got there, and I could tell you, um, I ended up finally getting to that fire camp.
Yeah.
I ended up getting accepted, not by what you think, but they ended up taking me as a cook, but I'm okay. I'll take it. It didn't matter
That's
to
all
me.
right.
I got there, but
Yeah.
I was fit at that point, but they still took me as a cook. I'm like, all right, it's a win. I got there, here in San Diego, and they came to bring my mom. By the time I saw my mom for the first time, she couldn't talk anymore. She was in a feeding tube. Um, and it was one of those things, heartbreaking, right? My cheerleader in life is seeing me in an orange jumpsuit that says prisoner on it.
Yeah.
You know, I know it didn't phase her. Her smile told me everything. And she understood my story, but it was still heartbreaking to see her, the one person that she sacrificed a lot of her life for to be successful, was in prison, right? And it was breaking my heart. I saw her about 3 times, and she passed away in 2015.
Mm.
And so I lost her. It was eating me alive that I couldn't be out there. By then, I was angry at the world, right? I was angry that, I got duped by these lenders. I was angry but I got, duped by my attorney. I was angry that I lost my mother. And then I needed to focus, right? And I mentioned this 'cause it's about focusing your time. And I told my wife, send me all the documents. I just feel like I still got to fight this. I'm not going to give up. So I needed something to focus on. So she sent me these thousands and thousands of paperwork for me to go through in my case. In that paperwork, I found a paper from Citibank Mortgage from it was 2 properties that we had sold, that they had done that on. And, I always assumed, because again, my attorney was in charge of this, it was over 500,000, because that was the losses after, they sold these properties, and that was a loss that the bank made. He never showed me anything. I found a piece of paper in there that they got a couple months before the sentencing, and it was from Citibank Mortgage letterhead, and it showed the 2 properties, and one showed 623,000, and the second one showed 5,000. And I was like, wait, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all.
There's no property in San Diego for $5,000.
Well, it was their loss, right? So why can one be such a huge loss? I mean, they had put the loss as the full mortgage, but what no one bothered to look at is that these properties were resold.
Yeah.
They double dipped. So no one bothered to confirm. The second one was resold and taken care of, and insurances, and that's why it was only 5,000. The first one, 623. So it was a clerical error that I found. And it was because of that clerical error that I went to prison, and I should have never have gone if it was corrected. After showing that, we started sending it to attorneys. Again, they said by the time you get out, by the time we fight it, you're still, going to be out by then. And so it beat me up again. It was another loss. I was like, man, there's a smoking gun here, in my opinion, and I can't win. Like, I can't. Why can I not prove my innocence? And it was one of those things where I got finally released. I did only 2 years. It was 2016. It was February. I literally came out, Mike, I came out angry at the world, and I had a hunger, right? I just had this hunger for a carne asada burrito. And that was the first thing I went to go get. And and I haven't stopped since, sadly, but I came out with the hunger to like, just to win. Right. I heard something I was watching some YouTube things on motivational, and I heard something. And since that day, it stayed with me. It's a quote from Frank Sinatra. And he says, the greatest revenge is massive success.
Yeah.
And I stayed with that. I stayed with that. And I said, because I know that revenge isn't good for the soul. It's not good for the heart. I was mad at the world. but I said, that's not going to get me anywhere, and it's not going to teach my kids anything.
Yeah.
So I decided I'm just going to go work and work and work. And I'm going to make sure that my kids will never, and my wife will never be in a financial situation if something happens to me. Because it was a rude awakening to see, if me being gone, my company just didn't exist.
Yeah.
And I never want to do that again. So I understood the power of passive income. So I went back to flipping. We went flipping all in, and we went from like 0 to 80 flips in 1 year here in San Diego. And I used that money. I started buying rentals. We started buying apartments. And honestly, within 5 years, I kind of took a step back. It was October of 21. I took a step back and I looked back, and I was going so fast that I just didn't even know what we had amassed.
Mhm.
And I kind of took a breather. When I took a breather, I noticed, man, we went from being bankrupt, to a $15 million net worth within 5 years.
Wow.
And,
That's awesome, dude.
and that was from me flipping, buying rentals, buying apartments, and our net worth had grew that much. And I tell people, like, if you hear my story, I was determined to see my mom.
Yeah.
I was determined that I was going to come out and make money again and make sure my family was going to be okay. And I tell them that determination doesn't ask for permission. I didn't
Mhm.
ask for permission to get to Fire Camp. I didn't ask for permission to make the amount of money that we did in those 5 years. It's really pushing yourself. It's pushing yourself to that next limit. It's showing my kids what they can do when you have that persistence and determination behind you. We got to that point, and then, I kind of got where, just kind of a little bit of fast forwarding, where I don't give up, and I tell people just the power of not giving up. Like, you just got to try until, your last breath. I'm built like that. Like, it's not about, I get when people tell me no, and if I can't go farther, I won't. But I just didn't feel right that I still never proved my innocence there.
Yeah.
And last year, 2023, I met someone. I told him, we were telling him my story, and he says, "Man, Jess, if you're telling the truth, I got an attorney for you." And I said, "Well, I am." So he put me together. I could tell you that the attorney, nice guy, but treated me like I was guilty already from the moment I met. I thought, "Oh man, here I go again. I just paid this money and to prove my innocence, and there's nothing there." I told him about this letter. He said, "Where's this letter?" I said, "I don't know where it is anymore." Long story short, I get a call a couple months later, and he says, "Come to my office." And I go, "Here we go again." Like, come to my office talk. It's never a good thing. Come to my office. He gets up, shakes my hand. His eyes are wide open. He says, "I found it. You were right." He says, "We're going to go after him. We're going to
Wow.
prove it." And May 7th, 2023, we go into court, and the judge sees it, and he just shakes his head, and he just ends up finding out we got an updated number from Citibank. It went
Mhm.
from, by the way, by then with interest, it was over almost close to $1 million of restitution. It went down to $34,000.
Wow.
I paid it on the spot, and the judge just looked at the DA and said, "Man, how dare you guys? Like, that's so I should have never gone to prison." So I haven't cleared my name yet. I'm working on it, but I
Yeah.
can tell you right now, I've proven that, and it's just changed my mind frame, and it just shows the power of not giving up, of keeping going, and perseverance in that. And I wanted to share that with my kids, and my kids, I finally got to the age, and now they're 15 and 16, but a couple years ago they were 13 and 14. They were coming up to me. I didn't really pay them allowance, and like, "Dad, we want to start making some money. What could we do?"
Mhm.
And I started thinking, what can I make them go file papers? Can I make them do something there to make some money? Or what would I want to know of what I
Mhm.
know now? And I actually put them in a mastermind for adults. I had asked permission, and it was to learn how to underwrite apartments.
Yeah.
And so they went in there. They were on accountability calls. They were learning. They never really, they learned underwriting. Kids want things yesterday, right? Just
Yeah.
like we do sometimes. And that's the world we live in. And what they didn't understand, I'm over here a proud parent because they know how to underwrite. They were talking about taxes. They were talking about, all these things of to have to do with apartments. And they
Mhm.
hadn't found one. And I think they weren't feeling like they had gotten one. But I was like, man, the knowledge that you guys have now to know about a good deal or bad deal, that is like the most important thing, even to
Yeah,
start
it's
in real
invaluable.
estate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important, man.
Yeah. So then being in the flips, and they're like, "Dad, could we get into the flips? And that might be faster." So we started learning, and they're underwriting flips and here in San Diego and things like that. And, so they're in the business now. I mean, they're in high school, they're kids, they have friends, they play sports, and on the side, they're doing real estate.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, I mean, we actually got picked up last couple months. Warner Brothers picked up a show, and it's called Kids Who Flip.
Yeah.
And my 2 kids are on it, and it's we've been filming for the last couple months, and it really shows, I think, the power of, yes, it's adults helping them. It's showing your kids about the importance of investing in real estate, about passive income, about what you can do. You still want to be a musician, an artist, you can, but you still nice to have this other avenue for income. How many people don't have that financial freedom? And I want to teach. If I can give anything to my kids, we joke, like, we've made some great money. I'm not going to give it to them. They got to work for their own.
Yeah.
That's me and my wife's money. It's not their money. Like,
Right.
So it's I want to show them that they need to figure out how to do it themselves. And if I can give that to them, I feel like we've done our part as parents to really show them the benefit of that, to still living life the way they want to, whether they want to go in our business or not. It's okay. It's just know the power of investing and reinvesting your money.
Well, the beautiful thing about this is they have now the tools if they ever need it, right? So say they get into this and they decide not to do it anymore for a while. They have it and they can always go back to it. So it's like this financial safety net, like what you and your wife have built, right? It's this financial safety net, and it's the skills that these skills are invaluable, right? And what they've learned from you and from that mastermind group and from doing this show is absolutely invaluable. And they're going to teach millions of other kids out there,
Right.
and adults, okay, what they need to know. And so that's the cool thing. The coolest thing about this is you've poured into them this way. My grandfather poured into me when I was farming with him in Oklahoma. I farmed with him for 9 years. I still use every single day. We lost him in 2007. I still use every single day things that man taught me. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.